What you got there?
This is my Savinelli.
Uh-huh.
It's beautiful, little mid-range in terms of the length. It's not a church warden, but it is nice and smooth.
It's lovely, yeah.
And a little, I've got Cutliff vanilla custard tonight.
You know what? I actually had vanilla custard earlier today and put it away and pulled out the old staple Queen Anne's Revenge for the broadcast tonight, just because the flavor is so robust. And I've been trying to cut some pounds before you and me head to the lake on the 4th of July with our wives. And so I'm not eating after 6 p.m. And I find that Queen Anne's Revenge gives me a feeling of being satiated if I'm hungry. And so I pulled it out for that reason.
I try to explain to people with the pipe, and I'm fairly new to it, a couple years maybe, but more recent. I've gotten into it more, I guess. But it's the process of it. This very relaxing of getting your tobacco and packing it, and just the lighting of it. And as you draw the tobacco in, as you draw in from the pipe, it's just a really slow, controlled breathing that I feel is very relaxing.
Yeah, the whole thing is relaxing, and it's a labor of love, if you want to use a cliche for it. You know, you taking care of your pipes, storing your tobacco in a good place, all that. It's not the most efficient way to enjoy tobacco. It's by far the safest, by the way, but it's not the most efficient. It is certainly the most enjoyable. And the great thing with a pipe, I think we've said this before, but the great thing with a pipe is you can smoke a pipe in the house. It doesn't stink up the house, and then hours after you're done, the smell's gone, which is very unique for most things. You smoke a cigarette or cigar in your living room, for instance, it's going to be there for weeks. And but no, it's my favorite for that reason. I like all the work you have to do, all the maintenance, all that stuff's kind of part of it.
I do want to welcome our people to Dog Show After Dark with Troop and Smooch.
Welcome.
Welcome, yes.
I wish I had a deep voice. Welcome. I can't. One day I want a man's voice. I sound like Steven Tyler married a redneck and got inseminated by Kermit the Frog. That's what my voice sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we talk about some things a little bit different, different topics in conversation. And this is a show we've been teasing, we've been talking about for a while. This is Fromm versus Fields. And a lot of people in the media avoid this topic like it's the plague, but we're going to talk about it. But first, there is something that I've been promising.
I was about to say, don't start with you better get on that.
Flash it up right here. It's the Ringo Pick 6. I'll tell you how to make it. Here's the ingredients. We're showing it on the screen now. Ounce of Rittenhouse rye, ounce of Angel's Envy rye. And then I got a couple bitters I use. It isn't more orange forward. It's got orange bitters. I also use a chocolate bitter. I choose Scrappy's chocolate bitters.
Interesting.
About 2 or 3 dashes of each. And a 1/4 of an ounce of a Demerara syrup. It's a richer syrup. 2-to-1 ratio Demerara syrup. You can use anything, but it needs to be a little sweeter. And then I got me a little orange peel, and I'll just express it over the top.
Show that.
Twist it.
That's not on camera.
Twist it and drop it in there. Yeah. And the Ringo Pick 6, make it, enjoy it.
The notes, the citrus notes are so strong for a non-sweet drink. It's really interesting. It's not a sugary drink, but the citrus notes are really strong, like it was. It's really nice cocktail.
It's not a high proof drink, and it is the whiskey makes the drink, because I use like I said, Angel's Envy rye and then the Rittenhouse rye, which gives some backbone. But it is the bitters, the orange bitters, and then the little chocolate bitter. It kind of sweetens it up a little bit, and it's very, very drinkable. And we made that last year. Was that? Yeah, we created that right before we went to the Alabama game.
The Alabama game, yeah, that's where you busted it out to the public. Yeah,
it's stuck.
Yeah, you actually became at least 3 or 4 gentlemen's favorite cocktail. I believe they actually come to your work and request it now. So
before we get started, folks, give us a like. Give us a like there right on the screen. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe, as this is going to be a good I guess a way to talk football and maybe some different aspects. I think, but it's Fromm versus Fields, man. And we can talk about Georgia, Smooch, quarterbacks. It seems like over in Georgia's quarterback history, they have rarely had that kind of a dual threat dynamic quarterback, number one quarterback in the country. I mean, you can say maybe Matthew Stafford had that top billing. Yeah. But he really didn't have, unbelievable numbers at Georgia. That was more NFL. He had the arm. He had the measurables.
He wasn't there long either. That was right before they changed the rule, right, about when you could hit the NFL draft. Wasn't he?
I don't even remember.
I believe he was. I believe he was one of those sophomores that hit the draft, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong.
But then you had Aaron Murray, and he was quarterback for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he put up, terrific numbers. Georgia had some teams back then where they were inch away from winning a possible championship in 2012, and put up just terrific offensive numbers. And Mike Bobo was the OC back then.
And they were also just flat out robbed by the committee one particular season in that same era, the Aaron Murray era, when they should have most definitely been playing for a title.
Well, and then you had, I don't know if you remember, but after Aaron Murray, who the quarterbacks were. Hudson Mason, that was his backup.
Yeah.
And then Grayson Lambert.
Which one punted? Was that Lambert that punted? One punted as well, right?
That was Ramsey, I think.
Ramsey, that was it. I was like, we got the punter playing QB, man. I was like, this is it's not the golden years.
But then we were excited because they brought in the golden boy was going to be Matthew Stafford. And he was from the Northwest, I think. And when Kirby was hired, they were really afraid that he wasn't going. They needed him to kind of be that number one recruit coming in, and Kirby was able to keep him because he was a Mark Richt guy. But Kirby came in and changed, and they kept Eason, and it felt like, okay, we got a shot. Eason didn't really have a great freshman year. He had, again, the measurables. There was something that just didn't quite connect, it felt like.
Watching Eason, that was probably, I always kept up with recruiting. The recruitment of Eason and Nauta were probably two of the races where I really became obsessed with the latest on recruiting and what was going on. And by that time, you could find being able to find game film online is a relatively new thing if you're as old as Troop and me. And so it was the recruitment of Eason that I became obsessed with recruiting and reading. And, I even found a couple of his uncle or somebody, I think it was his uncle, did an interview with local radio, and I even dug it up just trying to figure out everything about Eason because –
That was Eason?
Yeah, that was Eason. And
I was a little worried about it because his competition was not the best. He was just a man amongst boys.
Yeah.
But he was such a prototypical quarterback.
Right. And the arm strength was out of this world. And they would even say things like, oh, he's really a dual threat quarterback. And you could tell he's not fast. You're calling him a dual threat quarterback because he can outrun these children that he's playing against. And you're not really getting the full thing there. But he never clicked at Georgia. I remember even in the spring game when he threw a few touchdowns and everybody was just over the moon. There was never this is our guy, let's go to battle. That never happened with Eason.
And I remember talking to Chad Kennedy after that first year, and we were talking about Eason and the players coming back, and I was like, I just don't know if he's got it. I mean, I don't think he doesn't move the chains like he needs to. There's something missing in terms of just moving the chains. And he was a freshman, but he just didn't seem to be as it didn't feel like he felt like he was a lot of measurables that should work, but it just didn't work that great. But then he was the quarterback in 2017, and that was Fromm's class 2017, and but he got hurt, and then Fromm took over. Fromm was a 5-star quarterback too. He was everybody's darling. Played on the championship baseball team from the Little League.
Yeah.
They talked about that all the time, and everybody loved Fromm.
Yeah, my godson played on that ball team with Jake, and so when the draft rolled around and all that, and people were wondering if Jake was going to get drafted and all that, my godson was sitting there watching and giving me text updates from him, conversations he'd had about free agent contracts here and there and stuff like that. But Fromm was a local boy. I mean, I'm troops in Swainsboro. I was in Macon, is where I grew up, and so I mean that's Warner Robins right down the road, and and actually Fromm even made that. What is it? QB1 was the name of the Netflix show.
Yeah, it was something that Fields did too, though.
Fields made it too. Yeah, and as did what's the kid that had such a hard time? Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler was on that show as well, and then the kid Malik. Oh, drawing a blank. He's in the NFL now. Bounced around with Green Bay and Tennessee. Anyway, but yeah, Fromm came up and. He was one of those guys, the coach's dream type of player,
Great baseball player, too.
Great baseball player. Players loved him. Just one of those kids that was good at whatever he touched.
Yeah, but before we get into talking more about the controversy, Fields versus Fromm, I guess the question is, why do we even need to bring this back up? Why do we need to reopen these old wounds?
Right.
And to me, it's because I hear about it. People still talk about it when they're talking about Georgia, and it's a lot of times it's Georgia's detractors. It's not always Georgia fans who are like, "Man, what could have been?" It's not. It doesn't feel like it's a productive conversation. It's a way to punch back against Georgia from another team who says, "You guys, what are you guys doing?"
Yeah,
look at what you did. And there's always a little hidden agenda in there that makes me want to have the argument. I've had it in person, but I've wanted to, at least for a year or so, to have it on this show. But it feels a little controversial because of what we're going to talk about with this, the nuances in this competition. If it was ever a competition, some folks said it was never a competition. But the overriding question with Fromm versus Fields is, did Georgia mishandle a generational QB? Or did Kirby Smart just make a rational win now decision? It could be either of those, but there's also this other little undercurrent of maybe Georgia's just predisposed to not play an athletic, dynamic, dual threat black quarterback. That's the thing I get hit with a lot.
I've heard that a lot too. Yeah,
and they say this is the South, this is the SEC, and they may act like they want to play these top players at quarterback, but they really don't. They'll find reasons not to play that dual threat black quarterback, which that's what we're going to talk about. Yeah. That's not the whole conversation or the whole.
But it's an important nuance of a very complicated question. It's the one part of Kirby's armor people feel like they have found a weakness that they can hit. Oh, this was a bad decision. That's provable. Well, I will personally argue to the opposite of that tonight, and I will offer proof in a national championship. But it is where people think Kirby is weak. And then when you bring a personal charge into it, it elevates it up, right? And it's to add more gravitas, more weight to your argument. But the idea that this was the area where Kirby was completely wrong, and I've heard people say, Kirby almost got fired over this. This would have cost any other coach's job, that type of thing.
Well, the timeline in all of this, let's just kind of let you folks know. Of course, Fromm was a 2017 class, and he had all the accolades coming in as well. And then he led. He threw about 200 yards per game in 2017 when Eason was hurt, and Georgia made it to the national championship game. Of course, did everything they needed to do to win, looked like, and that was a 2nd and 26 play to Devontae Smith.
Tyler Simmons was onside.
Yeah, but the other part of that is that Georgia was a different team. They were a team that ran the ball for almost 260 yards a game between Chubb and Michelle. And then you got Fromm throwing it for 200 a game, 70% completion rate. That's 450, 460 yards of offense a game. Good defense. That's the way Kirby Smart. That's the way Alabama played back in those days too.
Yeah.
And that was just a different type of offense. That was the conservative type of offense. It was, but it worked.
Right.
And you could control the game. You could manage the game. And so that was the case for Fromm. He was a player that came in with all the accolades as well. And he took his team as a freshman. Whether you can the argument is, well, he had to do a whole lot. He just watch the games, watch him, watch him make throws when he had to make throws. Watch the touch he had on the ball. Watch him reading the defense, the pre-snap adjustments. He was a quarterback. He was a coach's dream.
And a back shoulder fade that rivals Aaron Murray's. The touch he had when he needed touch was elite. Now, he does not have an elite arm, and that probably made him a bit limited. But his touch on back shoulders and fades was elite level. Like I said, he and Aaron Murray are my top two with that. I'll take both of them over Stafford if it's a back shoulder fade.
And so that's what you got going into 2018 when you have the number one recruit in America, Justin Fields, and everybody salivating over him. Georgia fans can't wait to see this kid because we watched him play high school. And the little meme you see with Kirby Smart on the sideline where he kind of raises his eyebrows and backs up like, wow, what did I just see? That was Justin Fields.
Justin Fields, yeah.
And so we had him coming in as the number one recruit and a dual threat, could run, had a big arm, and we were so excited about that. But then 2018 happened, and Fromm had a good year. And he had, again, just a spectacular running game with DeAndre Swift and Elijah
Holyfield.
Holyfield. It was Holyfield and Swift, and they averaged right about 250 a game on the ground again. Fromm had the same type season, 200 yards a game, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Took them to the SEC championship where they had a 14-point lead. A couple of really fortunate things that Alabama always seemed to have go right for them in those years. And again, they beat Georgia by a touchdown late in the fourth quarter. Georgia had the lead in the fourth quarter, didn't hold on. But during that whole season, Smooch, is when you saw Georgia using Fields because they wanted, it felt like they wanted to integrate him into the system and give him a chance to do what he does best. Mm-hmm. And again, Elite 11 MVP, number one recruit in America, all the measurables you want, and just another darling. And that one player that seems like Georgia had evaded Georgia to bring it in, that kind of a dynamic player. They haven't had that. And so, but where was he going to fit in 2018? He was back then. You didn't have to play as freshman. The fact that he was getting time as freshman and not having to play because Fromm had to play in 2017 when Easton got hurt.
Right.
He didn't have to.
The plan was never for Fromm to play his freshman year. If Kirby had it his way, Fromm would have never seen the field his freshman year. I think that it's funny you mentioned what you did. The thing that struck me about the Fields' time in Georgia was it was like, this guy must really be something because Kirby is forcing him onto the field way before the Kirby plan dictates.
It felt like he was forcing him in there. Mm-hmm. He had a skill set that we could use. It just never quite, it felt forced because it was always like short yardage situations, gimmick type plays. It wasn't running the normal offense for the most part. Now they did have him in play. Even in that 2018 SEC championship, they had him in a play where he dropped back in the second quarter. He's in the game. He's dropping back to throw a pass.
Yeah.
And then he gets a little pressured. He kind of panics a little bit and runs and gets taken down at the line of scrimmage. But you're right. Kirby felt like he needed to force him in there when they didn't really need him, but he was just that kind of a special player they wanted to integrate into the system.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that really hurt, I think this, Troop, I think if Georgia was not in a running for a national championship that year, Fields may have gotten some starts. I could see where that might happen. It depends what you're playing for. But Kirby decided, and I think it was, of course, the right decision. The player that gave you the best chance to win was Jake Fromm, and if winning is what gets you into the SEC title game, that's what you're out there to do. There is a debate in college football: is it more important to develop players or win now? Kirby does a good job of both, but in this case, it was Fields can wait, like every other quarterback in the history of Georgia football has had to wait. And we are just going to roll with this and see how far it goes. It just didn't happen. And the reason the gimmicks didn't work when they brought Fields in, first of all, Fields is a rhythm player, never gotten a rhythm. But secondly, Georgia was a bully team. You can't take a bully lunch pail team and say, hey, we're going to get cute for 2 plays a game. It's just never going to work. That was just a silly approach at the way he was worked in. I would have put him in at fullback before I put him in those little read option situations.
Yeah, and I mean, we look back at it now, and that's a big knock. Is there's people who don't agree with this statement that Fields is a generational quarterback. Mm-hmm. They think when he went to Ohio State, there was a lot of things that tailored towards his skill set, but if he was a generational quarterback, could you start him? Could you take Fromm out of the game? Could you give him some starts and play a lot more, or maybe bench Fromm in 2018?
Right.
I mean, knowing what we know now, maybe you would, because we know what happened after that. Mm-hmm. But is there any coach who would do that in that same situation?
No,
I don't know.
And the proof came in that national championship game when Nick Saban brings Tua off the bench. It was a great coaching move, and it was a move that won the national championship for Alabama, 2nd and 26. But my point is, Tua spent that whole year on the bench. He sat behind Hurts because at that time the coach didn't believe he gave him the best chance to win. And so it was, we've got to try something. We go with this. And then Tua solidified himself as the man. Fields never had that moment. He never got that opportunity. He never had that moment where he came in and put the team on his shoulders and went and won the big game. And honestly, he's never done that.
Well, Fromm was a system quarterback. He really was, and he did all the right things. He had the coaching staff's trust. He had the locker room, commanded the locker room.
That's huge.
And that type of an offense where both of those years, 17 and 18, Georgia just ran the ball down people's throat and bullied them. And in the fourth quarter, that's where the death march came from. Mm-hmm. Another Troop Brinson original drink. But that's the death march. There was no stopping it by the time you were just beaten up in the fourth quarter. Georgia, again, both those years, right around 250 yards a game rushing. Yeah. And all Fromm had to do was to manage all that, get them in the right protections, make the right throws, and not make mistakes. And that was a kind of a Kirby smart, and for what it's worth, Alabama for the most part in the years past, type of an offense, and it won championships.
Yeah, and let's remember, it's very important to remember that Fromm was also pursued and offered by Alabama. So those are two very important things. The thing in this argument, we're about to get deeper into it, into the nastier parts of this debate. But there's almost this assumption that Fromm's just this local boy that everybody liked, so he got the shot. No, he was a national level talent, was on the Netflix show, was heavily recruited by Alabama, and I believe LSU as well, if I'm not mistaken, but offered at Bama, chose Georgia. So we're dealing with two quarterbacks of two impressive pedigrees coming out back-to-back years.
So can we understand from Fields' perspective and from his people's perspective, in terms of the people in his corner, why they thought he was misused and why he could be a little disillusioned and upset? Yeah, but he's coming in as the best of the best from the high school, and he wants just a chance to compete equally, and he feels like he's being pigeonholed into QB runs and gimmick and short yardage and gimmick plays. And you could see it when he came off the field in that one game where he's walking and the camera caught. I'm sure he wished they didn't. Yeah. But, yeah, he said, I hand the ball off good as you know what. Yeah, that's what I do. That's all I do is hand it off. And and I heard that, and I saw the clip, and I was like, that's not good.
He might be done. I remember thinking he might be done here. True.
So we can see why he was already probably weighing his options at that point, because especially where Fromm was entrenched. I don't know where Fields' playing time was going to come from either.
Exactly. Troop, I do understand the frustration felt by Justin Fields. So I'll take you just a little aside for a second. So my children were both Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu state champions, both of them. As a matter of fact, my son won 3 years back-to-back, and then 1 year he and my daughter won the same year. But anyway, we would go to these high-level jiu-jitsu tournaments. Now, when you get to these, when you're not talking about the very bottom, you get to these high-level tournaments, some of these kids have never lost. These kids have beat up everybody in their gym, and now they're at a tournament, and they've never lost before in their life. And they'd get out there against my son or against another superior jiu-jitsu player, and they'd get beaten, and they didn't know how to respond. It was something that even in their years of training had never happened. And it wasn't like they were bad sports. They didn't emotionally have the tools to handle the shock of what had just happened. They couldn't even process it. And I would always tell my son, they're not being bad sports, buddy. You're the first guy to beat this kid in 70 matches or whatever it was. And that's what happens when you're talking about an elite player like Fields. Troop, he's never been anything but the first pick in every sport he's ever played, right? He's the number one baseball, number one basketball, tiddlywinks, hopscotch, whatever it is. Fields was numero uno. He ruled his high school at a high school where a lot of serious high-level athletes have come through. He was king. He was king of the country. He was the top player, and it wasn't in debate. It's always in debate. It wasn't this year, and I will never forget the national pundit saying he's a guaranteed national championship for whoever signs him. And so you take that kid who has probably not sat the bench in his life. So 19, 20 years old. He comes in, and all of a sudden, you're telling this kid that has probably played offense and defense in football, any sport he played, they probably played him as much as they possibly could. You're telling this kid, okay, sit and watch. And it's not as though he had a bad attitude. I do think he had a bad attitude. I'll get to that in a minute. But it's not the bad attitude that makes the initial reaction so objectionable. It's the fact that he didn't know how to process it. He's a thoroughbred racehorse. They're built to run. And you tell them to sit on the sidelines, they don't even know what you're talking about. And so that's frustration. That's anger. That's confusion. Now, the problem with Fields is he had no tools for processing that correctly. And that led to some of the lashing out, some of the stupid things he said. And you mentioned this earlier with Fromm, as he started to lose the faith of his fellow players and teammates. Every time he lost a guy, that guy went right to Jake Fromm. And that chemistry on a team is hugely, hugely important.
Next question is, he did leave. And in 2019, there were a couple things that happened that let you know that it was the best decision anyway, I think, before I talk about 2019. Mm-hmm. In his situation, he probably should go. Georgia does not play the top offense. They are not as comfortable, even though we want it. We want it. Coaching staff wants it. The fans want that wide open offense where you just unstoppable. Mm-hmm. You got an unstoppable force at quarterback. That's not the way they played back then. They were very ball control, risk averse, still are. And it was a game management type situation where they were conservative offensively because they ran the ball so well.
Yeah, and that's 100% true, as well as the fact that Georgia's system, even then, was more of an NFL system than anything Ohio State has or will ever run, right? Ohio State wins score a lot of points in college football type of offense. And you see that today when players get to the NFL, particularly quarterbacks from there, and there's a steep learning curve. And so Kirby does not, we have harped on this so many times, Kirby's schemes are relatively complicated. When I say relatively, I mean compared to the rest of college football. They're involved.
Very complicated system for a quarterback to
it's extremely complicated. That was not Fields' forte. Now, I don't want to say dumb it down. That's insulting.
Well, if he'd have stayed there for 3 years, I think he would have been that quarterback we wanted him to be.
Right. And you know what his senior year would have been, Troop? Stetson Bennett's first national championship would have been Justin Fields' senior year at Georgia. And no one would have been talking about anything. And I think you're right. With some seriously good coaching by that point, Fields could have been a completely different quarterback even than he is now, because I believe he has unfortunately sought out coaches that do not push but adjust their game plan to coddle him. And now that he's at the highest level, that doesn't work.
Well, the question is, why did he leave? We got an idea why he left. Mm-hmm. There's some different things that happened within that we'll talk about. But I think he should have left, because I don't think Georgia, even though I wanted him to be that guy, I don't think Georgia was going to present him the best opportunity to do what he does best.
Even with the
Ohio
numbers.
State did.
Right.
But they are very QB friendly. A lot of one side of the field type reads, RPOs, verticals, very, very friendly for the quarterback to put up big numbers. Verticals, they do a lot of that.
Especially against the competition that Ohio State was playing at the time.
They tailored the game, tailored the offense around him, and Georgia was not going to do that. Kirby Smart was not going to do that. And that's the question, whether he should have, but whether it would have benefited him or not, we don't know. In retrospect, we look at 2019, and here's what we know. Back then, I was just irritated. I was upset because I wanted to see what Fields could do at Georgia. Right. But I still felt very good about where our program was and what we were doing. So in 2019, this happened. Coley took over for Jim Chaney. He went to Tennessee. And Coley, a great recruiter, turned out not to be a very good offensive coordinator, but he was also hampered by a couple of things. Georgia's top two receivers that year were Lawrence Cager and freshman George Pickens. Now, we know what Pickens went on to become, and in his freshman year, he was still a special player, but he was a freshman, and he ended up having to be the leading receiver for that team because Cager got hurt and missed 6 games. Cager was the security blanket for Fromm. He got hurt, and another part of that, what also happened was Georgia's running games really struggled that year. DeAndre Swift was the leading back, but Georgia only averaged like 189 rushing yards a game. That was about 50, 60 yards off of what they've been averaging. And so that was huge. The younger backs coming in there like James Cook and I can't remember who else. But they were young backs. Yeah. And so Swift was the main back, and the offense was much, much less effective that year. And so we looked at that and said, look what we're doing. Oh my gosh, why did we pick Fromm? Well, we didn't pick Fromm. Justin Fields could have stayed and competed with Fromm, and he might have overtook Fromm because a dynamic quarterback might have been just what that team needed. But he went on to Ohio State and had 41 touchdowns and 3 interceptions and just went off that year. And so it made it look even worse. It made Georgia fans and national fans say, what the heck's up with Georgia? They just don't want a black quarterback to do well there. They're going to let the good old boy continue to play even when he's obviously inferior. But we wanted Fields to stay and compete. He might have, in his second year, he might have overtaken Fromm in that situation with Georgia struggling offensively. Very well could have. And matter of fact, I thought by Florida, that would be a very good week for the Dogs to switch it up and give Fields this is my off-season thinking, that by the Florida game, you may see Fields come in as the starter, really throw a wrench into Florida's game plan, that timing would be right, and then it would be Fields' team. I felt really good about that. Now, let me say this, guys. Listen to me. This is the conversation. I'm glad you gave the stats, because there's no way in this world that Justin Fields would have ever had 40 touchdowns playing at Georgia that season. That's not the type of offense they run. He wouldn't have had 30. He probably wouldn't have had 25. It's just not what they were running then, and it wasn't the right offensive approach. Kirby was just starting to discover the evolution of what offense is in college football now, which it's a different thing. You were at the very crux of that turn where just lining up bully ball, Jay Coker as your quarterback and running these monsters up the middle like Bama did would win you national championships. It didn't anymore. But anyway, Kirby did not give up 40-something touchdowns to say goodbye to Fields. Fields chose to leave rather than compete. And to me, Troop Brinson,
That tells me everything I need to know. Kirby never ensconces a starter anywhere. He's all we're competing. I want the guy like a Puglisi. Puglisi may never start at Georgia, but when he was committed to Georgia, Dylan Raiola was committed to Georgia, and he was like, "Bring it on, let's play." That's the type of guy I want on that team.
The offense and the quarterback position is a position that Kirby Smart would rather you be on your third year in the system before you take over, because that's just it takes that a lot to do what he wants to do and the way he wants to control and manage a game. So that's, if you're going to knock anything about Kirby Smart, that's kind of what you can knock. But
that's where you go.
There's no coach who's going to take Fromm off the field in 2018 based on what he did in 17 and what he was doing. He had a great year in 18 as well. And he leading that team who could have won a national championship. Now, they would have had to beat Clemson and Trevor Lawrence.
Right.
But that was the big hill to climb. And then in 2019, let's say just for argument's sake that Fields said, "I'm going to stay. I'm a Georgia boy. I'm going to stay. I'm going to compete with Fromm," and he beats Fromm. And you say, "Okay, now we got a chance. We got the quarterback we need to win." Georgia had been building. They nearly won 2 national championships in 17 and 18. They were right there on the doorstep. They'd had to go through Joe Burrow and maybe the most iconic offense in the history of college football to win a national championship in 2019.
Yeah. And Fields isn't doing it. Fields didn't win a national championship.
And Georgia wasn't doing it.
Yeah, Georgia wasn't doing it. Georgia's not doing it either. Nobody's beaten 2019 LSU. It's just not. That's a lightning in a bottle. Every time I think we're about to see it, we get punched in the gut and it doesn't happen. I honestly believed at one point that Carson Beck had the talent to pull off a Joe Burrow type of year at Georgia, and it just never happened. Joe Burrow showed moderate promise at LSU, came in, took over, which, by the way, the interesting thing about Joe Burrow and LSU, Ohio State let him walk.
Yeah.
For Justin Fields.
Do you know? I saw this. I had to do a double take and go back and make sure this was right. I bet you can't tell me who the QB number 2 is for Georgia in 2019 behind Jake Fromm. Who is QB number 2?
Bart Starr. Fran Tarkenton.
Stetson freaking Bennett.
What? Come on.
The other quarterback was some guy named Priestley. Stetson was number 2.
Wow.
Behind, and it took him a while to kind of get it and find his legs and do it. He played a lot in 20 as well, but it's revisionist history to say that we knew that the offense was going to fall off a cliff in 2019.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of factors that didn't have anything to do with Jake Fromm. I'll be honest with you with that, but we would love to have Fields. The other question, Smooch, is how did he leave? How did he pull this off? And because back then you couldn't just leave and play. Right. You had to receive a waiver. There had to be it had to be a reason that the NCAA would deem was unusual, that maybe you were playing in an unsafe environment or your coach had left. There was something that had to predicate that you would be able to not sit out, because all these players that would leave back then had to sit out a year.
Right.
It didn't happen with him.
No.
And so the big controversy comes in now, because we already said that a lot of fans are like, Georgia won't play a black quarterback. It just won't. They say, well, they had Shockley and Quincy Carter, but then they
But that's what they hint at as to why the waiver was granted. Yeah.
Yeah, but one of the baseball players, I think it was first baseman. Last name was Sasser.
Oh, how are you going to handle this?
Yeah, I know. This is the hard part to talk about this.
Yeah,
but he wanted Fields in. I think Fields was one of his favorites because he was an athlete too. He wanted Fields in. He said,
sure.
"Put my boy in." Basically, he used some colorful language to say it. Right?
Yeah.
And this is all happening about the same time that Fields wasn't playing, and he was getting a little frustrated with not playing. And that became an issue. Issue to a point where we didn't know how he said it. He might have said it with a hard R or a soft R. It could have been, like we boys saying something, and saying something in another way is much different. Well, the Fields camp used it to help him play that first year, to transfer and be able to play. Now, there is some muddy water in there as well. I mean, it was such a big thing that Sasser got kicked off of the baseball team.
He did.
It wasn't like Georgia just ignored it. No, he got kicked off the baseball team. NCAA probably used that as well. They never came out and released any kind of a statement. If you folks don't remember what all this happened, there was no official statement by the NCAA
Nothing.
that said there was an unsafe environment. Fields felt like he was he felt harassed and in a spot where he couldn't play to his best, and so this is why he's transferring. This is the reason. And they never released anything. They just granted the waiver, but we knew it had to be something along those lines. They just never would say it. His lawyer came out. Fields' lawyer said that wasn't it. That wasn't it. I don't believe that because there was nothing else going on other than he just wanted to play, and he wasn't getting the playing time he wanted. He was not gonna. He could see that the writing on the wall that he was going to have to wait another year. He was going to be a junior before he really got a chance to play for Georgia.
It doesn't make sense to look at Justin Fields and to look at Jake Fromm and say that this player could start over this one. If you're just looking at them, look at them without their shirt on, look at them work out. That is what's beautiful about football. That's the reason arguments like this that get ginned up and PC and woke and all that, they irritate me so much. That's one of the great things about football is that it's what's inside the person so much to what makes them a leader and what makes them an elite player. And Jake Fromm, all of his strengths were invisible. And Justin Field, all of his strengths were visible. But the invisible strengths, the ones no one sees, Fromm dwarfed Fields in those. And Fields didn't have them. And I hope he kills it in the NFL. But he's done nothing. He's never taken those next steps. He was he number 4 overall? So it looks
like the way that Ohio State tailored the offense to help him didn't really help him. I mean, he's made great money in the NFL. But
it helped him make money. It helped him make money.
If you're looking for a generational quarterback on the next level, then you feel like maybe if he was stayed at Georgia, could have had an opportunity to develop differently. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe it never would have happened for him. But it wasn't because – I don't think it was because of his skin color. I really don't. No. And people will say, well, Georgia started Dwan Mathis in 2020, and then he didn't – he played like crap, and they got him out of there. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter what color Dwan Mathis was or Justin Fields or the Old South and the SEC and what they lean towards. If you look at the rosters, you can tell it doesn't matter. But there's an old feeling about quarterbacks that it does.
And the thing that's silly about it, Troop, is do you know how many resources and time recruiting takes? It is astronomical. Why would you spend the majority of your time on your number one prospect if you were never planning to play them because of some deep set hatred or whatever bigotry that you have? That makes no sense. So in other words, I'm saying, can you really see a scenario where Kirby puts all his chips in on getting Justin Fields to come to UGA and then says, good, now that we've got him, we're not going to play him, and twists his mustache?
We're going to make him hand the ball off and make him run RPOs and gimmick plays.
Right.
Here's why. Sense. The crux of this all, when I get questioned this a lot, Smooch, about the racial issues with this whole situation, and even going forward, even after that. And my answer is always, coaches are incentivized to win. They don't care what color you are. They are incentivized to win at the highest level. Their whole livelihood depends on it. Their ego depends on it. They want to win. And Justin Fields was we believe he could have been a winner at Georgia. It didn't play out that way. And we can, like I said, be revisionist. And looking at the history, we would say, well, they should have made that decision. Fromm didn't take Georgia anywhere. But if you lived it, and if you watch the games right now, Fromm was really good. And he was the right quarterback for this team in 2017 and 2018 with Georgia running the ball for 250 yards a game, and Fromm not turning the ball over and moving the chains and hitting their big receivers. I mean, even in 2018, his receivers were Riley Ridley, Godwin, McCole Hardman. He had some good guys, Nada.
Yeah.
But then in 2019, they were really scraping the barrel. You had that freshman in Pickens, and then, of course, Cager was hurt. I believe Cager was a transfer.
Miami. I believe it's from Miami.
Cager got hurt, and so with the running game that had disappeared, and that was a team that just looked stagnant offensively, and people will look at it and say, you should have chose Fields. How could you have chose Fields? Fields chose Ohio State. That he didn't give us the option to choose him in 2019. That's the point. He didn't give us the option to choose him in 2019. And that's where I land on this. I would have loved to have him have all the accolades and be a Heisman finalist like he was at Ohio State.
My goodness.
At Georgia.
Yeah, absolutely. It would have been great. It's, it's that what could have been thing. And I know that stings. We want to see it. It would be great to watch a guy like what Indiana did this year. You win the Heisman, you go out and win the national championship. That'd be awesome. But, didn't happen and wasn't in the cards.
Yeah. And then as the timeline progresses, Georgia, it's amazing that Georgia won 2 national championships. Because if you look at that quarterback room, man, it was all over the place. In 2020, you didn't know what you were going to get. You had JT Daniels coming in there, and Stetson Bennett, and Carson Beck was heir apparent. And then in 2021, same thing. You didn't know from week to week. People were rooting for Daniels because he really finished off 2020 pretty well.
Yeah.
And we finally got us a quarterback.
He had that game against Missouri, everybody at 400 yards.
You couldn't keep him on the field, and he didn't show you what it was. There were times when he could have played, and his camp was saying he wasn't healthy. And that really rubbed the coaching staff for Georgia wrong. So Kirby was like, get freaking Stetson in there.
Yeah.
If nothing else, he's mobile, and he'll make plays for us.
Right.
And dang, if the little Stetson Bennett, who always believed in himself, and had the swagger why did he have the swagger that he had?
Right.
Stetson Bennett pulled it off in 2021 and then just went bonkers in 2022. And even Todd Monken said, we won with Stetson in 2021. We won because of Stetson in 2022.
That's right
and,
on.
4,000 yards passing, 4 MVPs in elimination games. Nobody's going to do that.
Right.
And so you didn't. You might have missed. You might have missed that 2019 season. Maybe 2020 with Justin Fields. Those were the 2. That'd have been his heyday. Those 2 years right there. Right.
Yeah.
You weren't beating Joe Burrow in 2019, and then you had the COVID year in 2020. Right. Ohio State didn't play but 8 games in 2020. Just 8.
Right. Right. And then you had that was that Alabama
had that.
Asterisk national championship. Last one they won.
They were loaded for bear, and they had all the wide receivers. And then if he'd have stayed around, which I don't think Justin Fields would have stayed another year for his senior season, he'd have been gone regardless. And that was Stetson Bennett's Georgia's first national championship. So.
Yeah, and honestly, neither Jake Fromm nor Justin Fields showed the ability to rise to the moment like Stetson Bennett. So in the end, it worked out perfectly for Kirby, because anytime Stetson Bennett played in a game where it was all on the line or the season was over, he not only won, he was the MVP of that game. And not only can those 2 quarterbacks not say it, no other quarterback can say it. Yeah.
Yeah. There were. I go back and look at some of those games, and you guys know how close we were in 2017 to winning the Natty. It was an overtime loss on a walk-off to Devontae Smith on 2nd and 26. So Georgia, really anything could have happened. They won that game. And nothing the quarterback could have done differently there. But then in 2018, same thing. Fromm had a great game. Hot Rod missed an easy chip shot that hurt Georgia in that second half, a 30-yard field goal. And it was also a fumble right at the goal line. I think Josh Jacobs fumbled the ball, and then he recovered it just for a brief second, and it got knocked loose, and Georgia recovered it. It looked like that was Georgia ball, and then they gave him a touchdown. It was Alabama stuff happening still in 2018, but Georgia was good enough to win a Natty in both of those years. And 2019 was one of those, and 24 as well. But yeah. So Georgia was a team on coming up. And I just don't like people who revise history and go back and say that Georgia chose Fromm over Fields. No, they wanted that Georgia puts people in because talent always wins, Smooch. When you're incentivized to win, talent's always going to prevail.
Look,
and it just wasn't that freshman year for Fields was a whole different animal in terms of where Fromm was, and Fromm was winning. Fromm hadn't failed yet. He had yet to fail.
Right.
There's no way he's going to get unseated and put just because you say I got a special quarterback coming up. No.
Yeah.
In those days, if there was a incumbent that was playing well, there was no freshman going to knock him off his starting spot. So.
Well, the key is Fields left Georgia, guys. He wasn't run off. He wasn't told to leave. He wasn't overlooked. He wasn't told he had no chance to ever start. He left. Now, I tend to look at it as, so Georgia had the #1 recruit in the country and lost him, and still a few years later won a national championship. That's how I choose to look at it. I don't choose to look at, what could have been. We could have been this. We could have been that. No, you're not going to see a 45 touchdown performance from a Georgia quarterback, and you're not going to see schoolyard offense, no matter who the quarterback is. Georgia's going to play Georgia's way. Take it or leave it, but that's how Kirby plays. And Kirby's got the trophy case to back it up, even when it frustrates us. Don't get me to the defensive side of the ball. I can get much more in the weeds on that, but it's hard to argue with results.
Well, if we put this on the bed, I will say that even though I was Team Fields and I wanted to see him play and I was excited about him, there was two things he did that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth that keeps me from arguing for him as strenuously as maybe I have tonight. Mm-hmm. And it's that when he showed that he was more of a me player, when he came off the field and he was complaining to the camera's right there. He sees it. He just can't keep his mouth shut and then of course when the way he acquired that waiver to play at, and I'm sure his legal team said, let's do this.
Yeah.
But he said, okay. And so the way he acquired that waiver to play immediately, Ohio State left a really bad taste in my mouth. It was the best spot for him. I don't doubt that, but it felt like you're making Georgia look bad and you're painting an untrue picture, and I don't appreciate that because I'm Georgia before I'm any player.
Yeah.
Any player.
Right. You're stepping on people's heads just for yourself, and that's not cool.
Well, we did it. We talked. We finally covered. I'm telling you, we've been talking about this for at least a year about covering the Fromm Fields controversy. I think we hit it pretty well. I mean, I don't think we hit everything, but a lot of things that were on my mind for sure.
Well, if we forgot anything, leave it in the comments. Get the conversation going. We'll answer.
We want the conversation to keep going. We're not trying to. It's not clickbait. The title may say Fromm versus Fields, but that's just to let you guys know there's some interesting stuff to talk about that not everybody will talk about.
Yeah.
But we covered the best we can, and we'll continue. I don't care if we have to have another episode and talk more about it.
And give us some topics. This is the kind of place where you can do stuff like this. Doesn't have to be up to date with what's the latest in dog sports. Anything like this, we'll be glad to touch it.
Well, I think next week we maybe be talking about his Bigfoot reel or something like that.
That sounds good. I got some thoughts.
Yeah, we got some. I mean, the dog show's got some evidence, so there's that too. Yeah. Audio and visual stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Right. We could play some of that. We could play that recording we got. That would be amazing.
We absolutely would.
Yeah.
All right, that's all I got, folks. Don't forget to give us a subscribe and a thumbs up, and push us in the algorithm. It's off season, and we would appreciate it. I think it's some good content, and we work hard to research it and to figure out the best way to present it to you. And Smooch just got starting right now. Now he's going to start editing and get it out, put it out for you folks. So
absolutely.
All right. This has been an edition of Dog Show After Dark with Trooper Smooch.